Podcast. I am so thrilled to be joined here today by Patric Shannon. Y'all, he not only successfully owns two different businesses, LeadSnap and the Concrete Marketers, serving concrete businesses and really helping them strengthen how they're found in the industry, their advertising, but also he was a former professional poker player for 10 years where he really learned the secret art of mastering himself and others. And so, Patric, thank you for joining us today. You're such a dynamic and interesting person, and you've got so much to offer us today, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Christine. I'm excited to be here.
I'm so excited for this conversation. One of the things that we addressed kind of in the green room was honestly really addressing the fact that a lot of leaders in the trade specifically are living with head down, really moving through life at a very rapid pace with very little time for themselves. And you said this brilliantly, is that we all so often will think, well, if I just do more, I'll be more efficient. But because we're getting to this place of burnout, our 10 hours a day is really only 50% of what we could give rather than the alternative. So I want to talk today about the alternative for leaders, especially when they're in a stressful time or there's a time of uncertainty. How can we really strengthen ourselves? This podcast is called The Craft and the Calling. We focus so much on the craft, but what about our calling? What about the who behind the what we do every single day? So I'd love to hear more about that. 12 months ago we met, and since then you've been on an incredible journey that I'm excited for you to share with us today.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, the trades, they attract a certain type of person. And I think we can instantly come to an image in our head that's pretty similar, right? I picture a man, right? And I picture someone who's a really hard worker. And a lot of times these people, they're working with their hands. They're tough guys. They've got like an alpha attitude. And this idea of taking time for yourself, I think there's an association with weakness. And if you kind of, the saying, success leaves clues. And I can look across all the different companies that we've worked with. We're managing hundreds of sites in the concrete space. And there's clear differences between the ones that are doing multiple millions of dollars and the ones that are trying that, maybe they're doing 500, 750K. It's a different mentality. And the people that are in that 500K, they've just kind of like got their head down, and it's just the goal. Like the pathway is just work harder, right? The people that are on the other side, they're more business people. They've kind of stepped back, zoom out. They've maybe put educating themselves in business fundamentals ahead of like, let me hang more door hangers or like this type of like really in the weeds business. They spent time on growing themselves. There's a law. It's called the law of the lid, right? The business cannot grow above the capabilities of the leader of the business, right? It's just like, it's the law. So I think it's kind of like inherent into the business that these people are going to struggle against themselves, because it's this idea of like, I've got to work harder. I've got to do this, versus like really what is needed is you got to pull yourself out. You got to take care of yourself. Right. We talked, like you said, we talked a little bit about this in the green room.
Patric, what you just said, the law of the lid, I've never heard of that. But really we can only grow to the extent that we ourselves are, and it's a strength of the leader, right? So when you say strength of the leader, how do you actually define that? Like, what are the core tenets of what could burst the lid off, right? So that we're actually able to really help our teams flourish. But then also, okay, let me raise the roof, almost raise the ceiling, and allow for us to grow. So what are the core pillars, perhaps if this analogy works with your example or with that saying, like what are the core pillars of the lid that, okay, let's raise these pillars up and thus raise the ceiling and the roof of our business capability?
Yeah. I'll stick with concrete because that's an area that I know well, but I think this can easily be applied to any of the trades, right? And a lot of the pathway typically is this person is doing work in the trade in a concrete company. And for one reason or another, they decide they're going to start their own business, right? So now they're what Michael Gerber called in the Eden Myth Revisited a technician. So they're like very good at their craft. But when you start your own business, all of a sudden you actually have all these other hats that you've taken on. And a lot of people just ignore them, but they still exist. They're just not being done well. So there's marketing, right? There's finance. There's like hiring, the HR side of things. We've got the sales. There's all these different parts and pieces. We're good at one of them. That's the typical pathway. And I think if you're going to raise the lid, you have to have, you either need to put someone in there who's good at those things, or you have to learn those skills. And the problem is we love doing the trade. That's why we're in this business. We love doing the concrete or installing the air conditioner, but now we're a business owner and we're
Yeah.
no longer a technician. We're an entrepreneur. Like there's
Mhm.
a lot. So if the business is going to grow, like those areas have to be leveled up, right? We have to understand our finances. I've talked to companies where it's like they are selling more units, but they're not, because they don't understand their finance.
Hmm.
They're not profitable. Like every unit they sell doesn't create more money. It's just like, well, I've just sold another like break even unit where I've used my time and resource. We don't know our finances. We don't know like the profitability. So like, how can the business possibly grow? As the CEO, your job is really to raise the value of the company. That's one of your main jobs. The value of the company is based on EBITDA, which is your profit, right? And if you don't have your numbers in place, you could be booking more jobs. You could do $15 million a year and have no profit, and your company won't be worth much. Where a company that's doing $1 million a year is very profitable, they're worth more, right? So
Yeah.
you have to have these things, and it doesn't mean that you necessarily have to learn them, but your job is you can bring the talent in, right? Like, how do I find somebody? And with the way it is now, it is so easy to find high level people around the world that maybe you wouldn't be able to afford locally, right? So
Yeah.
we could find someone who's like an expert in finance in a different country, or like marketing or sales or whatever. Like sales may be harder for the trades where like the person needs to be in person there, but you kind of get the
Mhm.
point. But those spots have to be filled, and the kind of cumulative skill level, and this skill as the leader is like finding these people, creating the culture that's going to attract the people, right? So we can't just be like, hey, I'm going to like be very good at finishing concrete. We could say like, is the trade in any city, is the biggest company the one who does the trade the best? Like,
Yeah.
no. Like like if we looked at what's the biggest restaurant in the world, do you know what it is, Christine? The most
I
popular
don't.
restaurant in the world. It's McDonald's.
Oh my
Do we
gosh.
do we agree that they have the best burgers? Like, is that what they're known for? Their food quality is amazing. It's like
No.
so, no one thinks
Although,
that.
I gotta say, I do love a McChicken once a year. I like treat myself to a McChicken. It's my inner
Yeah,
child is so happy with that.
gotta treat yourself, right? But like the growth is not pinned to like the quality. I'm sorry,
Yes.
Christine. Give me 1 second.
Oh, puppy. That's so cute. I don't know if anyone else likes a good McChicken, but that's that, and also Chick-fil-A peppermint milkshakes. Those are
I've
mine
never tried a
too.
peppermint milkshake, but I'll tell you, I'm a little bit of a sucker for that. I don't know if they still do it. The McRib. They used to have the McRib at
Oh,
McDonald's.
I've never
It's
had
like a
that.
little, yeah.
I don't.
It's not good
It's
ribs,
funny.
but
I think it's that our childhood experience comes out, and we're like, oh, the memories.
yeah, for sure.
So funny. Keep
There's
going
some good
though.
memories tied to that.
I say again.
I said there's some great memories tied to that, like fast
Oh
food
no,
child. Yeah.
I know. It's so true. But keep going. I love where you're going with this.
Yeah. So I think like that's as the CEO, and that's what we become like for a lot of us, are the founder of this new company. Like if we want the company to grow and scale, you're not going to be able to do it if those other areas are limited, right? And if you look down the road at companies who have it figured out, it's no coincidence that they've all figured out those other parts and pieces. It's just like you can't get to the next level without that skill. Or like sometimes you can get there, but it's going to be capped until you figure it out.
Mm. So important. And I think that this is really a good, I talk about the concept of looking in the mirror and effectively allowing for us take time on a regular basis to look in the mirror, whether it's our business or ourselves, or just what is the reflection back of how well we're doing. And frankly, I think that this question of, are you operating as a technician, are you operating as an operator, or are you truly operating as an owner? Are you truly operating as the CEO? And this is what a CEO is, effectively kind of the definition. The responsibility of a CEO is to inform the culture, to inform the profitability of it and the growth and the trajectory and strategy. But if we're so head down in the business, it is fundamentally impossible for us to be able to do that. And so, Patrick, to your point of, effectively, if we want to raise the lid, and I like identifying that the pillars of what constitutes the lid or the roof is those core tenets of what drives a business: marketing, HR, fulfillment, sales, finance. And being able to identify, this is where I really shine. However, also, this is the role of the CEO. So if I want to play CEO, fine, that's great. However, if I'm not willing to really prioritize the profitability and growth of the business, I need to let someone else maybe come in and do that. And I see, Patrick, all the time, fractional insert C-suite position. I mean, we served as fractional CMO, chief marketing officer. You don't need someone full time to fill in these roles if you're not big enough. But just getting somebody, especially an outsider, to come in and see the business with new eyes. So I'd love to hear your thoughts in terms of, like, at what size should we start looking to insert those roles? Like, is there kind of a calculation, have you found, for the success of growth and scalability, of when does the owner stop being operator?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be different in every business, right? Because we have different profit margins. If you think about, let's say you think about a company that's doing like $1 million and they're selling roofs versus like a company that's doing $1 million and they're selling like $2 dog toys, right? There's way more operations, like there's way more units that have been sold of the dog toys, and it's a completely different business model. When we're growing a business in the beginning, we have to be shrewd with the hires that we bring on. And beyond the pillars that we mentioned, I want to make sure that, like, there are tons of areas that we have to grow that maybe aren't attached to, like, hey, I've got to understand finances. There's leadership, right? There's, like, we've got to set the culture. There's emotional intelligence. There's like all these different parts and pieces that are interacting on a daily basis. And if we don't like them, or we're not comfortable with them, or like, hey, we grew up in a time period where like, we've got to be tough, we don't complain, we drink out of the garden hose, this type of like mentality, it may be hard for us to realize that these are playing a factor, but they just are. And that may not be the message that a lot of, like, alpha male contractors want to hear, that emotional intelligence is going to play a factor, but it comes in when we start to try to build a culture, and we've got to be able to connect with people. One of the biggest learning lessons I learned when I was building these businesses is that sometimes cheaper is more expensive, right? So if we try to hire cheap, and we have to look over their shoulder all the time, they're doing things wrong, we have to go back and do it, we have to refund, we have to apologize, it hurts our brand, like all these different reasons that, like, when you hire somebody that is going to bring some thought leadership and bring some skills that you don't have, yes, that will be more expensive, but
Yeah.
it is going to be cheaper in the long run if it like frees you up from the obligation. You don't want to hire a bunch of people that you have to babysit, and then, like, how is that going to scale? What does that look like when you go from like 5 to 20 employees, right? We have almost 50 people between our two different companies, but we have leaders within the company that are managing other people. I couldn't manage 50 people. Like, I can manage maybe 5 to 7 people. Did we disconnect?
I think okay, I think we're back. You were coming in and out for the last few seconds, but I wasn't sure if that was just me. So I just
I
kind
don't
of
know.
let it roll.
Yeah.
But for the majority of what you said, I was able to catch it. Patrick, what you're saying here, the way that, as you were kind of describing, like almost in between the core pillars of what constitutes a business, in between HR and marketing and sales and fulfillment and finance, there's like this through line of leadership and emotional intelligence and being able to handle interpersonal relationships and the back and forth of what's the customer journey. And there's just all these like elements that kind of are supporting threads that ensure that pillars aren't operating in isolation, because that's one of the most dangerous parts is when you see sales and marketing that aren't, you know what, I wonder, am I being disconnected?
It's just kind of like freezing for a second at a time, but I think I'm following the main thread. I don't know if it's on my end or your end. I'm at my house on a
I
what I thought
know.
was a stable
I
connection.
am so bummed because I'm loving this conversation. Um, I guess we'll just keep going and hopefully this will work out in the end. Um, but there's these really important threads that kind of bring us all together and bond us, because otherwise everyone's operating in silos, and then it's impossible to have a business that's really operating at the level that they can, for whether it's scale, sale, or succession. Whatever your goal is as the owner, wherever you're taking the business, man, there has to be the it's almost like coherency across all of these core pillars that constitute a business. And so when you're talking about leadership, can you share a little bit more about one of the things that you've done over the last 12 months to really strengthen your own leadership and the way that you show up?
Yeah, there's a couple things that have been really helpful for me. Um, I hired a performance coach, which on some ways almost feels like a therapist at times. In addition to that, I also have a therapist that I work with, and I
Mm,
know traditionally that seems like maybe to some as like woo woo or I don't know what, but I'll tell you, I can see the differences in myself. And one, I had this idea of just like hammering it with intensity all the time, just like go, like you're not working the whole like hustle culture, like work harder, get the thing right. And I was feeling burned out and I didn't always realize that I wasn't operating at full speed.
mm,
Sometimes we'll work on a problem for a long time and then we step away and we come back and it's like, that's easy. There's like an easy solution that was right in front of my face. Like that moment there, you can realize that, hey, there was probably work that you needed to do and your subconscious probably worked through part of the problem, but you probably weren't firing on all the cylinders. We're working late at night and we're stuck with something. We go to sleep, we wake up, we look at it again. Now we have like good energy, clean headspace, and it's like a much easier problem. We don't realize it's kind of like anyone that has been overweight and lost a lot of weight, and then they realize that their energy level and they're just like happier.
mm.
They like they couldn't tell that when they were a bit heavier, but after it's gone and they see like what was missing. This is what it's like when we don't recover, when we don't spend the time to recover, we don't get to fire on all cylinders. That hey, we can work like 12, 16 hours a day, or we could maybe spend the first hour or two doing things for yourself. So for me, I don't touch my phone in the morning. I get up, I take my dog for a walk. This is my time. No one's allowed to come on this walk with me. There's no electronics. I can think about whatever I want, right? As a business owner, like we don't a lot of times get the opportunity to just like be in peace, right? And
Yes.
I come back, I exercise in the morning, I meditate. So these things I can feel a shift on those days. On the days I don't do it, it kind of feels like there's somebody sitting on my shoulder that's just like jabbing in my ear all the time. And I'm like, I'm just not focused. I'm not calm. We don't have that level of calmness. You've got an interaction to deal with somebody on your team or with a client or customer. Um, like you're just not as good as you would be had you taken that time. So you can go at 50% of the day for 16 hours, or maybe you take some time in the morning. Maybe you only need 12 hours, but now you're going at 100% the whole time, right? So
Yes.
you're happier, you're more relaxed. It's just like some of these things, it took a long time for me to realize that. And working with that coach, she kept hammering this idea of you can only perform into the degree that you recover. First time she said it, I was like, okay, yeah, that's cool, whatever. And then I started to feel it. And I'm like, on those days where I didn't do the stuff, I'm like, I can tell that I'm like 70% of what I was yesterday.
Wow. Wow. I love that you said it's in you do that time for you in the morning. And man, Patrick, can you actually talk through the mental hurdles that you had to move through to be able to take that time? Because I think that there's a lot of internal narratives that are actually blocking us from being able to prioritize that time that then allows us to get to 100%.
Yeah, some of the internal narratives, like, we have employees around the world, and they're there in the morning and they're there at night. So there's always somebody for me to talk to and like a problem to fix. And like this idea, I don't have time for this today. Like that was a narrative that I had to fight with. Um, this like I don't need to do this, or I'm going to do a shorter version of this thing, right? All those different things. Not going the morning really starts, like a good morning routine starts the evening before. And one thing I
Yeah.
struggled with is like if there's this I can't remember what the theory is called, but it's essentially if you don't have any time for yourself during the day, when it becomes nighttime, you're going to rebel kind of against yourself because you've never had during that whole day, it didn't feel like you had any freedom. And now you finally get the opportunity to make a choice and do what you want. And that choice isn't usually like, well, I'm going to like take care of, it's like, I'm going to eat junk food. I'm going to watch TV. It's like, I want to finally have some enjoyment, and I've got to like pack it into this little window here. So
Wow.
if we never get those breaks during the day and we never like take time to like have it, when we get to the evening, it's not going to be like, hey, I want to like, go to bed. I want to get some rest so that I can start my morning. And if you don't do that at night, when the morning comes, you're not going to have the energy and motivation to be able to do that. You're not going to have the time. So you're like, hey, I've got to be at work we've got to start this job at 8 a.m. or 7 a.m. Well, if you went to bed at 11, you're probably not waking at 5 to go walk and exercise and relax, right? So the thing kind of like cycles more and more, and it's just you got to kind of pluck yourself out of there and say, okay, this ends. I'm gonna prioritize myself first.
I've never heard it put that way of we effectively start rebelling at whatever point we start reaching burnout and we have never kind of satiated ourselves, right? Where our subconscious is wanting certain things throughout the day. And if we're not paying attention, it is going to act out. I feel like there's a whole framework there, Patrick. It's so important. If we're not paying attention, listening to that voice of what we need, like we actually really have true needs. We not only need water and oxygen, but we actually, our bodies need to move. And for so many of us, unless we're actually out in the field, we're sitting all day long and our body starts hurting. And then to your point about acting out, 5, 6, 7 p.m., our bodies are actually acting in response to the lack of care that we've given it. And then to add another layer to that, that's the time that so many of us are with our family, and our family are the very ones that we're saying we're doing this for. Yet if we're acting out against ourselves, we're probably going to act out against them too. The wife says, hey, dinner's at 6. And you're like, I've just spent my whole day giving to everybody else, and I have nothing left over to give to my family. And they're
Yeah.
the ones, they're our why that we claim. And so with this concept of starting in the morning and giving yourself 2 hours, 2 hours is my window too. And I 100% can tell a remarkable difference when I do and do not get that time. Because in one sense, it's actually it's responding to the prioritization and hierarchy of, man, I know that if I give and fill up, there's like a filling up of the gas tank, where we go and we exercise and we do either journaling or just whatever your practice is in the morning. It's like putting a gas, hooking up the gas and filling up our tank so that we're not running on fumes, and the sleep beforehand. I'm so glad you said that, because that really is the trigger to having a good morning routine.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of parts and pieces that have gone into my practice to kind of get it to where it is. And I
Hmm.
was somebody that fought it, and then I'm like, I don't know why I'm fighting it now. And it's now you kind of seek it. It starts to go into other areas. Once once you start to like realize that there's this inner peace that you can get, you'll start to recognize the things that take you away from it. So for instance, like picking up our phone and being like, oh, let me check this, check this. I can feel like, hey, I'm really calm and relaxed. And I start looking at it. Maybe I see something that's like frustrating, or there's all these requests, and it's just like starts building and building and building, and it's like gone. So then what's the solution? Like, I don't need to look at social media. I just don't, right? So I can just avoid that and start going towards things for peace. There's this like um we all have different things that are going to pull us back. What Jess, my performance coach, talks about is like a recovery stack. And like there's different things that are going to affect us differently, right? So no screens. Like I'm in the tech world. So like making sure I disconnect with screens like 90 minutes before. I'll read fiction. So I used to, before I started reading fiction and like reading books, I was not like a studious kid where like in high school, I think I graduated with a 2.8. Like I just like barely got by. Like people wouldn't know that that's what it was. So I wasn't someone who loved reading, but as you start to get into it, you like become a faster reader. If we're reading so slowly that our brains get bored, then like we like, what page am I on? Like, but when we start to read the right stuff and you kind of like, it's a skill, you get faster, it becomes
Right.
rewarding. Before I started reading fiction at night, I would have dreams like I have to solve this problem, or like somebody's chasing me. Right. It was just like there was never, I talked to my wife and her dreams are like, I was like sitting outside and this bunny fell asleep on my lap and then a squirrel was on my shoulder. And I'm like, there's a giant crab chasing me down the beach with like a machete. Like that was my dream. And hers is like Snow White, you know? Um, when I started reading fiction, then my dreams, like what I was loading into my subconscious at night, like I was like in outer space and I was doing like cool stuff. And it just
Wow.
like it permeates into your soul and you can
Mm,
ignore it or you can like realize that it's there. If you like, how many times do you have to hear this message? Because this probably is not the first time someone like anybody that's listening has heard the message of like, take care of yourself. Like
mm.
from somebody that didn't to somebody that did, like that journey has been shared like thousands of times with people. And I guess until you feel it, it's one of those things you just like, you maybe you just got to do it on your own before you like really can believe in it. I would say over the last year that happened for me where I like started really prioritizing my recovery. I use this thing called a Shakti mat. It's kind of like a
What's
yoga mat with spikes.
interesting?
You should check this thing out, Christine. Um,
Spike? Say it again.
it's called Shakti. It's Shakti.
Shakti mat. Okay.
So what you do is you kind of lay on that thing at night and it hurts like for 90 seconds. Then it starts to then you like the pain goes away and it starts to feel good. And then it basically is melts the stress right off of me. And so I use that before bed. If I wake up and I'm wired, I'll use that again. So you got to
Wow.
get your recovery stack built in there of like what works for you.
This is so huge, Patrick. Just the other day, I was talking with someone, and we were effectively identifying that your body needs to come to stasis. It effectively needs to come to this level of calm if we ever want to train it something new. Like if we want to instill a new mindset, a new behavior, a new pattern, a new way of looking at the world, all of which is necessary to grow and elevate our businesses. If we want to take our business from 1 million to 15 million, that's a very different operational approach. That's a very different mentality. Talk about moving from technician or operator to owner and CEO. That's a very different mindset that requires a different set of behaviors and skills. And so, what you're saying isn't just necessary for us to ensure that we're not acting out and going kind of berserk on people, but it's allowing for us to elevate our own selves so that our body, our physical body, our mind, our spirit, our soul, we're coming to a baseline of stasis in the evenings and throughout the night so that in the morning we can train and instill new behaviors and allow for growth. You know, if we never allow for our body to get to that level of calm, we're constantly operating in those kind of survival instincts. So if we're constantly in burnout, there's just like right below the surface, our neurological system and nervous system is actually wired for fight, flight, freeze, or fawn responses because it doesn't feel like safe because we're not taking care of it. So when we start taking care of it, it comes to this stasis, and then we can start training it. And then our body and our mind become something that we really can utilize in our life rather than it being something that's actually at the driver's seat. Our burnout is at the driver's seat, just looking for a quick, almost like a quick satiation for the stress rather than us being the ones in the driver's seat where our body is in kind of response and ownership to
Mm,
us. So
yeah.
I'm so grateful for what you're saying here. It's so important.
I absolutely agree. And I think a lot of us, we as business owners, we kind of put ourselves into a box. We build a
Mm,
life and we've invested so much to like get there that sometimes we feel trapped. And like there's all these responsibilities we have towards our team, our employees, our customers. And it seems like with all that on our plate, like, how can I do this other stuff? Right. And we don't realize like life is going to be over for all of us on at some point, right? We're all going to check out. And one of the things that's going to have that happen faster is if you live in a constant state of stress and your cortisol is just high all the time. Like you're not going to sleep as well. You don't sleep, you don't recover. Like this is where, my dad, I don't know if I shared this with you. Um, he slipped into dementia, and
mm,
dementia is 99% preventable. Like that's what they're saying now. The way that we live our lives, right?
wow.
Not getting enough sleep, like drinking alcohol all the time contributed to that. Being overweight, not exercising, even like brushing your teeth apparently is like tied to dementia. So who's going to be more likely to have these things? Right. And if we have families and we have kids or something like that, are we okay with this like compromise? Is that box really still a box if we start to look at like the consequence that we pay for it?
Wow.
Right. The
Wow.
7 Habits of Highly Effective People, that book. Do you
Yeah.
read that book? It's so good. So there's a part in there where he talks about like you got to start with the end in mind, because you
Mm,
can spend a long time like climbing a ladder and realizing it's not leaning against the right wall, right?
mm,
So sometimes we kind of like get
hmm.
into our life and we're like so focused on things and like these are the rules, and some of the rules that are there aren't really rules. They're just like it's like an invention that we created where it's like I can't
Yes.
do this because of that, and
Yeah.
it's kind of sad as like the people that our parents get to the older age and we
Mm,
see decisions that they made and the consequences that they're paying for those. And I go to the
wow.
gym, in my gym, there's like 75, 80-year-old people that are running big businesses and they're happy and they are in shape. So it's like
Yeah.
there's a possibility there, but they didn't subscribe to the rules of the box that someone else
Mm.
does.
This is so important, Patrick. I could not agree with you more. I was shocked. I remember 2 years ago, I walked into probably one of the rooms that had the most wealthy people I've ever been in. And they've got, none of them were billionaires by any means, but they're running, upwards of $500 million businesses. And the topics on stage, I think we had, out of the 10 different keynotes, we had one about business. The rest of the 9 were about how to be healthy, how to orient your own self, what are the decisions you're making, how to be a better leader. Rarely it was talking about business, which was just like, okay, if you want to get to that level, not that 500 million is your goal by any means, but if you want to mentally and emotionally get yourself to the level of that type of leader that could be qualified to run that type of business, these are the things that we need to be talking about. So when we kind of re-looking at the lid, I think that there's an element of, if you want to raise the lid and raise the roof in your business, that's a different discussion. If you want to raise and elevate the lid for your own life, that's another discussion here. And I think that everything you just said are all core pieces of the pillar of that roof. So, Patrick, just to kind of wrap things up, one core practice that people could take, or step people could take from this conversation, what would you advise them to do?
I would be really clear on the vision that you have for your life. Like that
Mhm.
idea of starting with the end in mind and work backwards and kind of ask yourself what has to be true. Right. And when we actually have a third company, Rank Masters, we coach marketing agencies and entrepreneurs. And one of the first things we do when they come in is we ask them, like, what is your goal? And a lot of them, you can almost predict it. If you knew where their income was, you could predict what their goal is. Because a lot of times their goal, if they're just getting started, they're like, hey, I want to get $10,000 a month. That's like a big, sexy number. And I'm always like, well why? Like, how is that going
Mhm.
to change your life? Because a lot of times we do things for other people rather than ourselves. And I think you've got to really get clear on what you want your life to look like and then solve for that. And $500 million is a ridiculous amount of money. And it's probably not going to look like way sooner than that is the life that you want. And there are
Yeah.
miserable billionaires out there who never did that. Right. And there are people that, hey, they don't make a lot of money and they're very happy. So like in the end, what's going to be more important to you? Like if you know that Christine, you probably done that funeral exercise where you're like in the casket and people like, what do you want them to say about you? Do you want them to say like, hey, he built a really big company? Has anyone ever said that? Like, I want someone at my funeral to be like, I built this big, that's not never what I want them to say. I want them to talk about the amazing times we had together. So if that's your vision, make sure on a yearly, quarterly, monthly, weekly, daily, you're taking things that go in the direction that are
Mm.
that's where how you want to end up. Like if you're
Mhm.
stepping towards that every day and you can see progress, I think I think you're going to get there faster. Where if you don't have that clarity of vision, you're just going to float around and get burned out.
So good. Patrick, thank you so much. Man, everything that have we've talked about today really lends to that second half of this name, the craft and the calling. And may we never forget why we're doing this in the first place. And we have to, if we can't remember what it is, maybe we never actually defined it in the first place. So for everyone listening, I would highly encourage you to do that exercise. Like Patrick was saying, you can lie in the casket and envision people walking past you. When I turned 30, I wrote my eulogy, and that was so helpful to get super clear on what do I want to be said of me at the end of my life, and am I living accordingly today? And then look in the mirror. What needs to change? Where is there a disconnect between what I'm saying versus how I'm living? And then either something needs to change, the belief or the behavior. So, with that, Patrick, thank you so much for joining today. This is such an important conversation, and I'm grateful for you, my friend.
Thank you so much for having me. This was awesome. It's always great to connect with you, Christine.
So good to connect with you. Y'all, thank you so much for joining us. This is the perfect time of year to be doing this exercise. How do you want the rest of this year to